So we continue our series, and today we're looking at St Ephrem's notion of paradise. So Ephrem the Syrian wrote a madrashe on paradise, and obviously this is highly significant because this gives us a good idea where the Qur'an got its idea of paradise from. It goes to prove that the Qur'an was written in a Syriac milieu, which included the works of St Ephrem. This madrashe offers us multiple images of the joys and pleasures of the Garden of Paradise. Will we see a similarity to how the Qur'an describes it? Absolutely. Ephrem's madrashe provides the template. The collection of 15 madrashe on paradise are preserved in an early 6th century manuscript written in the city of Edessa in the year 519 AD by an otherwise unknown scribe named Julian. In the manuscript, they are all presented in the same meter melody, with the exception that madrashe 13 and 14 appear in a continuous alphabetical acrostic pattern of stanzas, a feature that binds these two pieces together somewhat out of step with the presentation of the other madrashe in the collection. This arrangement suggests that in spite of the fact that they are now presented as separate compositions, numbers 13 and 14 must once have circulated as a single composition, and it is quite possible that they and other parts of the collection were not originally by Ephrem, but were later included in the portfolio. The Syriac madrashe is a genre of liturgical poetry set to music. In Ephrem's hands, it also became the literary genre of choice for winning and holding the allegiance to Nicene orthodoxy of the Syriac-speaking Christians in Syria or Mesopotamia and the frontier regions between the Roman and Persian empires in the 4th and 5th centuries. It is a teaching song, a distinctive genre in its own right. It is not just hymnody, nor is it simply a poetic recitative. Rather, the madrashe composed by Ephrem the Syrian were poetically metered recitatives set to music. In the Divine Liturgy, they were publicly performed after the solemn reading from the Scriptures. They explored the scriptural themes meditatively, and they were sung by trained choirs with congregational responses after each stanza. In all likelihood, their tunes were catchy, and their words and phrases would have been eminently memorable. So, functionally, they acted like meditative homilies. Griffiths goes on to say that in Ephrem's madrashe on paradise, the point of departure seems to have been a passage from the Gospel according to Luke. It's a familiar passage, you can read it there yourself. It obviously relates to the good robber on the cross next to Jesus, where Jesus says to him, "Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Ephrem says he heard this passage proclaimed in the liturgy. He put it this way at the beginning of one of the madrashe: "A statement that delighted me shone forth in my ears from the text that was read about the story of the robber. It gave consolation to my soul due to the multitude of her faults, that the one pitying the robber would lead her to the very garden whose name I had heard, and was overjoyed. My mind cut loose its reins and proceeded to meditate on it." Ephrem described the manner of his meditation on paradise in other songs in the collection. In the first one, he speaks of his reading about paradise in the Torah, the treasury of revelations as he styled it, in which the story of the garden is revealed. Here in the Torah, Moses, who teaches all men his celestial texts, the master of the Hebrews, taught us his doctrine. And Ephrem goes on to sing, "Gladly did I come to the story of paradise, which is short to read but rich to investigate. My tongue read the stories clear in the account of it, and my mind flew up to soar in awe. It searched out its glory, not indeed as it is, but as it is given to mankind to apprehend. In my mind's eye I saw paradise." So there's obviously a similarity between this idea of him transcending into paradise and the obvious story of Muhammad entering paradise as well. In yet another song in the collection, Ephrem very evocatively describes his first-person journey to paradise, led there by the lines of the book of Genesis. With the Qur'an and later Islamic tradition in mind, One might even think of Ephrem's adventure as a spiritual mirage avant la lettre. He says, "I read the opening of this book and was filled with joy, for its verses and lines spread out their arms to welcome me. The first rushed out and kissed me and led me on to its companion. And when I reached that verse wherein is written the story of paradise, it lifted me up and transported me from the bosom of the book to the very bosom of paradise." The eye and the mind travelled over the lines as over a bridge and entered together the story of paradise. The eye, as it read, transported the mind. In return, the mind too gave the eye rest from its reading, for when the book had been read, the eye had rest, but the mind was engaged. Both the bridge and the gate of paradise did I find in this book. I crossed over and entered. My eye indeed remained outside, but my mind entered within. I began to wander amid things not described. This is a luminous height, clear, lofty, and fair. Scripture named it Eden, the summit of all blessings. As he came down from his mental journey amid the glories and wonders of the garden, Ephrem reflected, "I was in wonder as I crossed the borders of paradise, at how well-being, as though a companion, turned round and remained behind, and when I reached the shore of earth, the mother of thorns, I encountered all kinds of pain and suffering. I learned how, compared to paradise, our abode is but a dungeon, yet the prisoners within it weep when they leave it." A notable feature of Ephrem's descriptions of the afterworld in the Garden of Paradise is their appeal to the senses, albeit for him, as one scholar has put it, the bodily senses become symbols of another kind of perception, namely spiritual perception. However that may be, in the travelogue of his mind's journey into the Garden of Paradise, Ephrem describes the beauties of Paradise Mountain in terms of vision, taste, and even scent. He speaks of a beauty that no paints can portray, where scented breezes blow with varied force over a banquet, where those who minister never weary in their service. The trees with their branches form a bower that invites the blessed to recline in their bosom, and as the saints recline, below them are blossoms, above them fruit. Ephrem envisions each season as yielding its best produce in paradise, and he uses an earthly image to make the point. So this is clearly like the Quranic idea of paradise, with grapes and wine and lots of garden imagery. Of course, the Qur'an talks about there being rivers of wine in paradise. Certainly the hadiths do. Here is another passage from the madrashe, and we'll note in passing that it refers to springs of wine. "The air of this earth is as wanton as a prostitute with whom the 12 months consort. Each one in turn makes her comply with its own whims, while she produces fruits from them all. Whereas the chaste and pure air of paradise is unpolluted in its purity by the dalliance of the months. There the abundant flow of their produce is ceaseless, for each month bears its own fruit, its neighbour flowers. There the springs of delights open up and flow, with wine, milk, honey, and cream." Ephrem makes a major point of the fact that not only the souls of the just, but their bodies too, are destined to enjoy the delights of paradise. He says the soul cannot have any perception of paradise without its mate, the body, its instrument and lyre. And so in a beautiful stanza he envisions the following scenario unfolding. "In the delightful mansions on the borders of paradise do the souls of the just and righteous reside, awaiting there the bodies they love, so that at the opening of the garden's gate both bodies and souls might proclaim amidst hosannas, 'Blessed is he who has brought Adam from Sheol and returned him to paradise in the company of many.'" And as if to recognize that most people in the Christian congregations were married, in one stanza of another madrashe, he likens the perennial fruit of the trees of paradise in the several seasons to the extended human family, and to the perennial productivity of the institution of marriage in human society. That cornucopia, full of fruits in all stages of development, resembles the course of human marriage. It contains the old, young, and middle-aged, children who have already been born and babies still unborn. its fruit follow one another and appear like the continuous succession of humankind. In fact, with this image of marriage in mind, on a broader reading of Ephrem's madrashe, it emerges that much of the lush imagery, the grapes and the grapevines, the fruits and the flowers, the trees and the fragrances, all go together in Ephrem's imagination to furnish paradise as a setting for what he calls the bridal chambers of the blessed, bridal chambers of glory, of light, and even of joys. In paradise, Ephrem says that one sees the disciples on high in their bridal chambers, where God also gave Adam a chaste bridal chamber. Ephrem says further, in paradise, the virgin who rejected the marriage crown that fades now has the radiant marriage chamber that cherishes the children of light. There all fruit is holy, all raiment luminous, every crown glorious, every rank the most exalted, happiness without toil, delight that knows no fear, a marriage feast which continues forever and ever. Sebastian Brock concludes, one could fairly say that the image of the bridal chamber permeates Syriac liturgical poetry, serving essentially as a metaphor for the place of union between the divine and the human realms. The eschatological bridal chamber of light or joys represents the fulfillment of the potential bridal chamber of Adam and Eve. Brock's mention of the potential bridal chamber of Adam and Eve refers to the view of Ephrem and other early Syriac-speaking Christians that had they not sinned, Adam and Eve would have been united in a bridal chamber in primordial paradise. This view seems to have been elaborated by Christian exegetes in contrast to a view espoused in Jewish circles, according to which Adam and Eve were united in a bridal chamber in paradise before the fall. In one of his verse homilies on creation, the Syriac poet Jacob of Saru portrayed the aborted marital consummation vividly. He wrote, God made Adam a bridegroom in this great bridal chamber that he had decorated. He adorned Eve as a virgin bride and gave her to Adam, providing in her dowry the sea, dry land, and air. All the ages gathered for the great wedding feast he had made. The bridal couple were radiant in their crowns and their garments. He had covered them with glorious light and splendid radiance. He left them on their own among the trees with their fruits, having given them as a wedding present every kind of tree and fruit. The garden rejoiced at the beloved bride and groom. As for the tree of life, he had hidden it in Eden's great bridal chamber, to be there for the bridal couple of light once they had been fulfilled. But the tree of knowledge, full of death, stood beautifully outside, and so that they would know who was the Lord who had honoured them, he established the law that they should not eat of the tree. He gave the whole garden to the new children he had acquired. He appointed only one tree to test them. The mischief maker barged in and sowed discord in that banquet. He stole the bride, he whispered his lie, he deceitfully led her astray. The wretched little hawk came to stand among the innocent doves. He chased them out of the wide nest of Eden. Now it's interesting, the reference to the mischief maker, which is of course the devil, but it's a word that we see a lot of in the Qur'an, particularly spreading mischief. So is there a line of influence there? Possibly. One notices the prominence of light and the related concept of glory in the passages that speak of the bridal chambers of paradise in the Syriac text, a feature that recalls the importance in the Syriac exegetical tradition of the originally Jewish idea of Adam's robe of glory or light in paradise. This luminous dimension of the imagery serves the purpose of reminding the reader that in the view of Ephrem and of the other Syriac writers in whose works the theme appears, the sensual images of paradise are meant as metaphors. Nevertheless, when all is said and done, in the writings of Ephrem the Syrian and the Syriac liturgical tradition in general, one does find, contrary to Christoph Luxemburg's views, an abundance of marital and sexual imagery in the descriptions of the joys of the Garden of Paradise. What relation this lush imagery in Syriac literature might have to the depictions of paradise in the Arabic Qur'an is another matter. And I would think that an important difference straight off would be the fact that it's meant in a metaphorical or symbolic sense, in the work of, for example, St Ephrem, whereas in the Qur'an it's taken a much more carnal, direct sense. So that's it for today. Thank you all for watching. See you all soon.